Good evening, everyone. Tonight, we're going on a peaceful journey through time, exploring the history of sleep. How humans have rested, dreamed, and understood sleep has changed across thousands of years, from ancient civilizations and their night rituals to the modern science that studies our sleeping minds today. So as you lie down, take a deep breath. Let your body relax and your thoughts drift gently. This story isn't meant to rush you. It's meant to slow you down, to help your mind settle as we uncover how sleep shaped our past, and how our past shaped sleep. Dim the lights, get comfortable, and let's begin our quiet journey into the history of sleep. In the small Georgian town of Gori, in 1878, a boy was born to a shoemaker and a washerwoman. His name was Iosib Djugashvili. The world would later know him as Joseph Stalin. Life in Gori was harsh. His father drank, his mother struggled, and poverty was a constant shadow. Yet, even in those difficult days, his mother dreamed her son would become a priest. She sent him to a church school, a place where the young Stalin learned discipline, language, and the power of ideas. But within those same walls, he discovered something else: the writings of revolutionaries like Karl Marx. That discovery changed everything. The path of faith soon gave way to the path of rebellion. Stalin joined secret circles of young radicals, spreading Marxist ideas, organizing strikes, and defying the Tsarist empire that ruled with an iron fist. Again and again, he was arrested, exiled to Siberia, and yet he always returned. Each punishment only hardened him more. Each exile taught him patience, silence, and survival. When the Russian Revolution erupted in 1917, Stalin was ready. He aligned himself with Lenin and the Bolsheviks, helping them seize power. But even then, he worked quietly in the background, building networks, observing rivals, and waiting for his moment. After Lenin's death in 1924, that moment came. Through calculated moves, political manipulation, and sheer determination, Stalin outmaneuvered his opponents one by one: Trotsky, Zinoviev, Kamenev, until he stood alone at the top. The poor boy from Gori had become the ruler of the Soviet Union, the man who would shape the destiny of millions. When Stalin took control of the Soviet Union, the nation stood at a crossroads, vast, wounded, and poor after years of war and revolution. He dreamed of a powerful, self-reliant empire that could stand equal to the great nations of the West. But to reach that dream, he believed sacrifice was necessary, and sacrifice came in abundance. Under his rule, cities grew from dust. Factories rose where fields once lay silent. Gigantic dams, steel plants, and railways became the symbols of Soviet strength. The country leapt decades ahead in just a few years. But behind that progress was a darker story. Millions of peasants were forced into collective farms, stripped of their land, their livestock, their freedom. Those who resisted were branded as enemies of the state. Entire families were sent to labor camps in the icy wilderness of Siberia. Fear became the air people breathed. Whispers replaced laughter. A careless word could end a life. Yet amidst all this, propaganda painted a picture of unity and strength. Posters of a smiling Stalin, the father of nations, watched over every home and factory. The Soviet people worked tirelessly, many believing they were building a brighter future. And in a way, they were. The Soviet Union transformed into an industrial superpower. But it was a future forged in silence, obedience, and blood. The 1930s were years of fear and transformation. But as the new decade began, an even greater storm was forming beyond the borders of the Soviet Union. Adolf Hitler had risen to power in Germany, and his armies marched relentlessly across Europe. For a time, Stalin believed he could avoid conflict, that the Soviet Union could stand apart from the coming war. In 1939, he signed a pact with Hitler, the Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact, an uneasy truce that secretly divided Eastern Europe between them. For nearly 2 years, Stalin watched as Nazi Germany conquered Poland, France, and beyond. He believed he had bought time to strengthen his military and industry. But in June 1941, that illusion shattered. Without warning, Hitler launched Operation Barbarossa, the largest invasion in human history. Millions of German soldiers stormed into Soviet territory, and within weeks, entire cities fell under fire. Stalin was stunned. For days, he withdrew from public view. The unshakable leader is suddenly silent. But then, he returned, grim, determined, and resolute. He addressed the nation in a calm yet powerful voice. "Brothers and sisters," he said, "the enemy is at the gates. This is a war for our very survival." Under his command, the Soviet Union fought with unimaginable courage and sacrifice. The winters were brutal, the losses unbearable, yet the people stood firm. From the ruins of Moscow to the ashes of Stalingrad, they refused to surrender. The Battle of Stalingrad became the turning point. Named after the leader himself, the city's defense turned into a symbol of defiance. After months of fierce fighting, the Red Army surrounded and crushed the German forces. It was a victory born of blood and endurance, a victory that changed the course of the war. As the Red Army pushed westward, liberating cities, and finally reaching Berlin in 1945, Stalin emerged as one of the victors of World War II. The man who had defended the motherland and led his nation to triumph over fascism. But that triumph came at a staggering cost. More than 20 million Soviet lives were lost. Entire generations had been wiped out. And though Stalin was hailed as a hero, his eyes saw only power, and his heart trusted no one. Even in victory, the seeds of fear remained. The war had made him a global leader, but also deepened his belief that only absolute control could protect his state. Thus, as peace returned to the world, the shadow of Stalin's power grew even darker. The Second World War had ended, but peace did not bring calm to the Soviet Union, nor to the world. In 1945, Stalin stood among the great victors, alongside Roosevelt and Churchill. The Soviet flag flew proudly over the ruins of Berlin. And the Red Army's victory had made the USSR one of the two global superpowers. But beneath the triumph lay mistrust, a new tension between East and West. Stalin believed the capitalist nations would always try to destroy socialism. He saw enemies everywhere, not only beyond his borders, but even within his own circle. Thus began a new kind of conflict, not fought with bombs and tanks, but with fear, ideology, and secrecy. The Cold War had begun. Across Eastern Europe, Stalin built a wall of influence. Nations like Poland, East Germany, Hungary, and Romania came under Soviet control. He installed communist governments, each one loyal to Moscow, each one tightly bound by the iron grip of the Kremlin. This divide between East and West became known as the Iron Curtain. Propaganda flooded every corner of Soviet life. Posters praised the glory of the worker. Films celebrated Stalin as a wise and fatherly leader. And children grew up reciting his name with reverence. In reality, the secret police kept constant watch. Anyone who questioned the system, writers, scientists, even party officials, could vanish overnight, swallowed by the machinery of the state. Inside the Kremlin, Stalin's paranoia deepened. He trusted no one completely, not his generals, not his ministers, not even his oldest comrades. He believed that power could only be safe in his own hands. Meetings turned into tests of loyalty. One word out of place could mean exile or death. Yet, for millions of people, he remained a symbol of stability. The man who had defeated Hitler now stood guard over a nation rebuilding from ashes. The Soviet Union launched great projects, new cities, universities, scientific programs. And soon, the race for space would begin. But while the world looked toward the stars, Stalin looked over his shoulder. The fear that had protected him for decades now began to consume him. The Iron Curtain divided the world. But it also divided the Soviet people from truth, from trust, and from freedom. And behind that curtain, the shadow of Stalin grew quieter and darker as his final years approached. As the 1950s began, the Soviet Union stood strong. A global power feared and respected. Its cities had been rebuilt, its armies were vast, and its influence stretched across half the world. But within the walls of the Kremlin, Joseph Stalin, once the unshakable titan, had grown old, suspicious, and isolated. His health was failing, yet his will remained as iron as ever. He spent long nights poring over reports, accusing ministers of treachery, and ordering new purges that swept through the ranks of his own government. Even his closest allies lived in constant fear, for no one could predict when the next whisper of disloyalty might end their life. By 1953, his paranoia had reached its peak. He planned new arrests, new trials, and perhaps another great wave of terror. But fate intervened. On the night of March 1st, 1953, Stalin collapsed in his room at his dacha outside Moscow. He lay on the floor for hours before being discovered. His guards, too afraid to disturb him, waited until it was too late. Doctors were finally called, but their efforts could not undo the years of strain, the sleepless nights, and the weight of his own fears. On March 5th, 1953, Joseph Stalin died. The man who had ruled the Soviet Union for nearly 3 decades took his final breath, alone, silent, and surrounded by the system he had built through blood and fear. His death sent shockwaves through the nation. Millions wept in the streets, holding portraits of their leader, believing that the father of their country had left them forever. Others quietly felt a sense of relief, as though a heavy curtain had finally lifted from their lives. In the years that followed, the truth of his rule began to emerge. His successors denounced his cult of personality, revealing the extent of his purges, his cruelty, and the terror that had defined his reign. And yet, even stripped of illusion, Stalin's shadow continued to stretch across generations. He had transformed a peasant nation into a superpower, guided it through victory and ruin, and left behind a legacy that was both monumental and tragic. To this day, the world remembers him not as a simple man, but as a paradox, a revolutionary who became a tyrant, a modernizer who destroyed millions, a leader who built an empire out of fear and faith. As the story of Joseph Stalin fades into history's quiet night, one truth remains: that power without mercy can shape nations, but it can also destroy the very soul of those who hold it. Now, as we close our eyes to rest, we remember not only the man, but the lesson his life left behind. It's designed to gently wind the listener down and leave them thoughtful but peaceful, with a slow rhythm and cinematic tone. And so, our journey through the life of Joseph Stalin comes to an end. From a small town in Georgia to the vast corridors of the Kremlin, from revolution and war to power and fear, his story reminds us how deeply one human life can shape the fate of millions. History often whispers through time, reminding us that greatness and cruelty can exist in the same heart, that ambition can build nations and break them too. In Stalin's world, loyalty was survival, and silence was the language of the living. But now, as night settles around us, the noise of that past grows quiet. The echoes of marching boots, of speeches, of endless parades, all fade into the stillness of history. What remains is a lesson that no empire, no leader, no fear lasts forever. So as you rest, let your thoughts drift away from the heavy pages of the past. Let the stories of power and pain dissolve into calm. The wars are over. The voices are gone. And the night is peaceful once again. Thank you for joining this journey through time, through struggle, through change, through memory. If you enjoyed this quiet exploration of history, stay with us for the next story, another chapter of our shared human past. For now, close your eyes. Breathe deeply. And let the world of yesterday fade gently into dreams. Good night and sleep well.